Hi guys, my name's Lee Broughton and I'm a Randomfish. Hit the subscribe button and let's all be Randomfishes together, shall we? Between 1984 and 1988 in British TV shows, we had a stop-motion series of The Wind in the Willows. Why is this relevant, you may ask? I mean, this happened ages before I was even born. Well, you know what? When I was younger, I found one specific thing. This is where it gets awesome. The Wind in the Willows had a nice, interesting cast of actors. Now, I wasn't really paying that much attention to the other actors, but Toad, I loved. I loved his voice, I thought he was funny. The episodes that I was shown on VHS were good, funny episodes, and I enjoyed them very much. And what do I find out years later? Toad was voiced by none other than David Jason. That's right, Del Boy himself voiced Toad. I didn't even know what to think. It was like some kind of weird little fallback into my childhood. Like somehow Del Boy had followed me from Wind in the Willows to when I was older, finding myself only really enjoying Only Fools and Horses because of Del and his weird sarcasm and his pathetic attempts to seem more educated than what he actually was. Now granted, I didn't exactly take all of life lessons from him because, well, frankly, Del Boy's a moron, but still. But that really highlighted some things for me, and I remember looking back on some of the older Wind in the Willows stuff that I sort of found myself looking at and kind of enjoying. And what do I discover? I remembered something from way back in my past. Now, the show itself finished producing in 1989, and that was that. But while I was growing up, there was a family that I was fairly close with, and, you know, my parents would drop me off at theirs if they had to go off and do something big, and I'd stay with them for an afternoon or for a couple of hours, which was nice. I played with their kids as well, and it was all a lovely time. I was a little kid, they were little kids, it was lovely. But what do I discover? One of their VHS tapes. Kids, if you're watching this, ask your parents what a VHS tape is, because it's more than possible that you don't actually know if VHS was even a thing. Unless you watch really ironic shows or your parents are super into like the retro stuff now, which would be kind of fun actually. But anyway, I discovered a VHS tape, and on that VHS tape is a movie from that TV show. Honestly, I didn't remember much of the stop motion show. What I do remember is this: The Tale of Two Toads. The Tale of Two Toads is essentially the Prince and the Pauper story, if you will, but done with Toad. Basically, throughout the run of the TV series itself, Chief Weasel has been attempting on more than one occasion to try and get all of the woodland creatures kicked out of their houses, thus he could take over the riverbank along with his army of weasels and ferrets and stoats, which is fine. It's usually what he did. However, in this one, he discovers something very specific. An actor who spends his time impersonating Toad, doing it more for laughs than anything else, and just getting some money for it, and having a fairly good laugh. But Chief Weasel then has a plan that he executes almost flawlessly. I mean, I honestly do think that if the rating was, this wasn't a kid show, they'd have done much worse, and you might have thought they actually would have won by that point. It's kind of cool. What they discover is that this actor who can impersonate Toad also looks very much like Toad. So what do? They dress him up in Toad's clothes, they crash Toad's car that he's travelling in at the time, and they switch them around, kidnapping our young protagonist of David Jason and sticking him in a place somewhere. The actor then proceeds to go off and become Mr. Jerk Toad. He runs some kids off the road with his car. He makes the other animals of Farthing Wood turn against each other. I say the animals of Farthing Wood, I'm sorry. Makes the other animals of the riverbank turn against each other, you know, tells Ratty, Mole and Badger various things that aren't actually true to try and get them to turn against each other, which is nice. And we eventually then discover, well, Badger discovers, technically speaking, he is the first one to really sit there and go, this can't be Toad. It looks like Toad, it can't be Toad. They then discover, of course, the actual Toad, and they bring him back to their house. But Toad at this point has no idea about what to do. He wants to run off and hide. He wants to just, you know, he wants to get out of there. He doesn't want anything more to do with this place. He wants nothing more to do with Toad Hall because it's now been taken over by the Weasels and Stoats, as well as this fake Toad character. But Badger, at which point, then completely turns him around and says, no, you're going back, because the other animals have concocted a plan. Now follow me on this. Toad impersonates his impersonator, impersonating him. Oh, and the impersonator's name? You're gonna love this. Ladies, if you're ever thinking of something really interesting to name your kid and something that your parents or your husband may actually hate, Isambard. Yes. Let that sink in for a minute. His name is Isambard. Ooh. Sounds like a character, like a magician character you'd find at the circus or something, doesn't it? Huh. Anyway, moving onwards. So, they get Toad to impersonate Isambard, impersonating him. They capture Isambard, tie him up, and essentially attempt to make everything worse for himself. At which point, we actually then get a very interesting look as to why the Weasels and Stoats, and even the Chief Weasel to an extent, can't really be that kind of intimidating, winnable villains, because there's this brilliant bit where you kind of have this reverse logic type thing, and it's brilliant because you see Toad impersonating Isambard, impersonating himself, and it's brilliant because there's this wonderful bit where he says something like, it's something along the lines of going, you know, how can, you know, I've been knocked out, I'm Isambard, he's Toad. Yes, I jolly well am Toad. And he walks around him, and there's this pretty bit where he goes, you know, it's something like, how could I have a bump on my head if I haven't been knocked out? And Chief Weasel goes, he's got a bit of a point there. And Toad just goes, best way to solve this, walks over and goes, yes, well, you're the one who's tied up, aren't you? Ergo, you can't be Toad, can ya? And the Chief Weasel goes, he's right. What? You had such a good plan. You had such a good plan, Chief Weasel, and you just missed the mark there. If you'd been just a tiny bit more intelligent. But you know what? Actually, saying that now, yes, it's all very confusing because, frankly, Toad and Isambard do 100% look alike, so that's kind of the point. But the funny thing is that the Chief Weasel's plan wasn't just to take over Toad Hall and live there with Isambard. He's actually planted bombs, and I mean this, planted like dynamite, into the homes of the other animals. At which point you then hear that he's going to blow them all up within like a day or something, so that they have nowhere to live and they have to leave the riverbank. Jesus, that's overkill! If I may borrow a tiny moment from Nostalgia Critic, damn, that's harsh! That's like not producing Sonic the Hedgehog movie toys because you know they won't sell. It's practical, but still mean! It's like, you know what, I can give the Chief Weasel props. He legitimately has a plan that makes me go, ouch, you're evil. Like, this isn't just take over someone's life, this is take over your life and then blow up your friends' homes because they happen to be your friends. F you! Jeez! But you know what? Slightly gets to more of the normal, happier ending type things because Toad, of course, tells them what they're actually going to do. They prevent the homes from being blown up, at which point we then get Badger, Ratty and Mole coming back into Toad Hall to retake it. And you then get this wonderful moment where Toad is swinging from a chandelier, and then Isambard is swinging from a chandelier, and the two of them are having a fight looking exactly the same as each other. And I'm just going to say this, whoever did the stop motion for this, you must have had a friggin' ball doing this. Because I'm sorry, nothing amuses me more. It's like watching Wallace and Gromit. I sit there and think to myself, my god, you animators must have had a lot of fun doing this. Because there's just no way in hell that you wouldn't have had fun just pushing those chandeliers and laughing your heads off at the idea of these two characters, both voiced almost in a way by David Jason, because they have to sound alike, because the thing goes, I'm Toad, no, I'm Toad, he's the imposter, shoot him, no, he's the imposter, shoot him. Those moments. Yes! Just two David Jasons swinging from chandeliers. Yes! Then they figure out which one is Isambard and they knock him out and everything else. And the weasels all leave and blah blah blah. And you know what the interesting thing is? Is that in this show you do begin to get the idea that Toad has become a better person. At the end of the Wind in the Willows story, you learn, you kind of see that he's trying to be modest, but he's infinitely more, he's just as charismatic and just as sort of slightly conceited as he's ever been. But throughout the show, you begin to see like these little traces that he actually is trying to be a better person. He is trying to be a better animal for his friends and for the people in general. And, I don't know, I feel like at the end of this, it doesn't feel like his journey's complete. But that's where it works. None of the characters' journeys were technically complete at the end of this. And I like this. And the reason why is because you can never have a completed journey all that way through. I feel like something as big as Wind in the Willows, you should be able to live with room for improvement for all the characters so that the audience can create the new ideas for themselves. Yes, we crave resolution in film, in TV shows, anything really, especially in this current streaming world that we live in. But also, having something that's not quite resolved, especially at the end of a show like that, but enough hope in your minds to believe that these things are going to be okay, it makes it better. And that's kind of what I feel like is a message for 2020 in a way. It's this idea that yes, things are going to be bad. Yes, certain, shall we say, certain hair-having and not hair-having people in charge of certain countries, no matter what they do, there's always that glimmer of hope that maybe at some point in time, we at least can all be better people, even if they can't. With that said, Randomfish out.